again, and it's time to continue. As I broke the living roll on. So we will begin. And the other day we left off in chapter 3, which was called Michaela Loves Colin. And we left off with Granny talking about some French tourist who had paid £10 for a jar of jam in the shop at the farm. And Uncle Joe has been teasing him, so he will pick up where we left off right there. Joe, didn't I try to give her back the change? I ran out after her, but she was gone. Of course she was. The only reason you ran out was to check that she wasn't coming back. Your grandmother is a swindler, Polly. Sure, what's £10 to the likes of her? Asked Granny, not at all insulted. She wouldn't even miss it. Till I tell you I was over with your Auntie Deirdre on Tuesday, Polly. Mrs. Odlum asked, referring to her only sister, mother of Cleena of the Dreadlocks, and of her two younger and yet dreadlocks sisters, Kira and Aileen. They lived on the outskirts of Mallow Town in a 6-bedroomed, 4-bathroomed detached house on its own extensive grounds. Although they didn't have a fraction of the money the Adlams had, Deirdre certainly knew how to spend it. As Polly's mother was forever saying, with more than a hint of jealousy, a trip to her sister's always unsettled the hard-working Mrs. Odlum. Coming home after listening to Deirdre's tales of shopping trips to Cork, of shows being in Dublin, and a foreign holiday taken with the girls, as she always referred to the women she played golf with, Mrs. Odlum would moan to deaf ears for the rest of the day. What's the point in having money in the bank if you can't enjoy it? She could be heard muttering as she went about her job. She was in Lanzarote, she was telling Polly, with Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. O'Toole, you know, the lady who runs Fashion Fit. She showed me photos of the apartment they stayed in. Fabulous it was. Really, Polly, it was far too big for them. 4 bedrooms, all with double beds, a living room with another fold-down bed, a little kitchen, a galley kitchen, I think she called it, a balcony with a view of the beach. Mind you, Deirdre said they tended to stick to the pool, for the beach was a good 20 minutes walk, which got a great colour, although I don't think that all that sun can be good for you. You never think she was younger than me. Still, she had a great holiday by all accounts. Do you know, Polly, it kills me to think that I'll probably die without so much as ever having been on a foreign holiday. Here it comes, said Mr. Odlum, winking at Polly. What's the point in us having money in the bank if you can't enjoy it? You know, Polly, I've never been abroad. What are you talking about? Didn't I take you to London on our honeymoon? Asked her husband. Sure, that was years ago. Anyway, it hardly counts. We went on the ferry. I'm talking about flying off somewhere exotic, somewhere sunny. Do you know, Polly, I've never been on a plane. I'll tell you what, Margaret, said Mr. Odlum. First thing in the morning, we'll take the car down to the long field. You can get up on the roof and I'll strap you down with some twine. I'll give you a little bit of a whiz round. Sure to be like flying, even better. You'll be able to feel the wind in your hair. Your father is useless, Polly. He won't go anywhere with me. When you're finished college, we'll go places together, won't we, Polly? Polly loved sitting there listening to them all. Even if she already had heard half of the stories, things that happened 2 weeks ago, they'd tell her again, forgetting that they told her last week. Other stories she'd been hearing for as long as she could remember, like her father's old joke about taking her mother down to the long field. Sometimes the two of them, usually her mother and grandmother, would both talk to her at one time, but she'd learned the knack of letting both speakers believe it was really them she was listening to. Her grandmother was 84 now, Uncle Joe was 66, her father 65, and even her mother had turned 60. All getting on now. She knew, but found it hard to really appreciate, for she saw them all at their best. She didn't hear her granny's morning prayers, said in thanks because she was alive for another day, or see her mother looking increasingly weary as she went about making breakfast. Nor was she there in the quiet evenings during the week when her father and Uncle Joe sat by the fire after a day's hard work, feeling old and tired. Have you enough tea, Polly? Asked Uncle Joe. Loads, thanks, Uncle Joe, said Polly. There you are, Polly, said Granny, tipping the rinds of her rashers into Polly's plate. I know how fond of them you are. After the tea, Daddy settled down to watch the 9 o'clock news, and as always the comfort of a sated stomach and a roaring fire lulled him to sleep before the newscaster had even finished her summary on the stories of the day. Granny, as she always did at this time, had wandered off to her room to look a few squares of the chocolate bar, which she knew Polly would have left under her pillow, and to do what she called her job, which meant getting her night clothes ready and her teeth out before coming back to settle down for the late show on the not very late time of 9:30. Polly supposed that when it was first started, like about a billion years ago, that 9:30 must have been considered late. Joe had wandered outside for a smoke and to finish up on the farm, before he too came back in for the late. There was just her, mother, and herself sitting at the kitchen table now, and her father snoozing by the fire. This was Polly's mother's special time with her daughter, and the only time they knew they got a chance to talk, so she always said their mother and daughter time, as she liked to put it, and the time Polly dreaded most in the whole week, for her mother watched to hear her stories of the wonderful time Polly was having in college, accounts of parties and of friends, and the kind of carry-on she'd like to think she'd be getting up to if she was Polly's age. And there was no point in Polly telling her she hadn't gone to a single party, hadn't made any friends, let alone boyfriends, and certainly no point in telling her that she was unhappy in college. She knew that if she did, like everything to do with her, it would become a topic of general discussion with Granny, Daddy and Uncle Joe being brought in on it, all worrying about her, and their worry and their unhappiness becoming the constant topic of the household. It was easier to keep it private and keep her mother and everyone happy. So Polly hardly knew became her friends for the half an hour, and the stories about parties she'd overheard, because her own stories to the family would be gory, but these stories would make them rest happy that little Polly was having a great time at college. And when her mother, as she always did, came to the question which would most interest her, anyone special, which she'd ask offhandedly, with her eyes glued to her daughter, Polly would laugh and shrug and say, Mom, it's too early for that. I'm having too much fun. Which sounded hollow to her, but satisfied her mother, who'd laugh and say, Of course you are. Plenty of time yet for that sort of thing. But what had possessed Polly to say otherwise when her mother had posed that perennial question that night? What had made her pause and answer hesitantly? Well, yes, said her mother encouragingly. Well, there is someone I like. It was the thought of Davy that made her waver so, the memory of the way he looked and felt as he slept on her shoulder that morning, for she had thought about little Elsie. Just then her father grunted and stirred in his seat. Daddy, Polly has a boyfriend. Daddy, called Mrs. Odlum. Are you listening? Polly has a boyfriend. Mom, don't go telling Daddy, pleaded Polly. He's not a boyfriend exactly, just someone I like, she tried to explain. But even in his slumber, Mr. Odlum's ears had pricked up at the magic word. A boyfriend, eh? Our little Polly has a boyfriend. Just then, Granny shuffled in, and Mr. Odlum lost no time in sharing this development on a much speculated upon topic. Granny, our Polly has gone and got herself a boyfriend, he shouted at his mother, who suffered from partial hearing loss, as she settled herself down in her favourite seat by the fire to await the late show. I didn't say it was my boyfriend. Is he at college as well, Polly? Asked Granny, who never missed hearing anything of interest. Her hearing loss was only partial. Yes, he is, Granny answered Polly. But what was the point in saying other words? I expect he's in the same class, Granny said. Going to be a teacher like Polly, said Mrs. Odlum, who was very adept at filling in the blanks. Mammy, stop going on about him. What's his name? Is he a nice boy? Her mama asked. Mommy, Joe, did you hear Polly has a boyfriend? Called out Mrs. Odlum, hearing the back door bang shut. Oh, and when are we going to meet the lucky fellow? Said Uncle Joe, coming into the room. Has Cleena met him? Asked Mrs. Odlum, a little concerned. No, not yet. Probably just as well, she said, relieved. You don't want him thinking you'd be like her. I know she's my niece, but I'd be the first to admit it. She's very wild. I'm all for young people having a good time, I was young myself once, but half of what we hear about her is true. I'm sure we don't hear the half of it. And then that madam is going to come to a sticky end. It was the worst thing George and Deirdre could do, letting her move into a flat. She should have stayed in the hostel like you, said Mrs. Bradlow. So, Pet, when will we get to meet him? Mom, please. Is he from Cork? You probably know his family. Shh, said Granny, it's starting. A hush descended over the room, and the family turned towards the television and awaited the appearance of Gay Byrne, probably the only person in the world who could have stopped this inquisition. All except Polly, who, conscious of the fact that there would be ad breaks, took herself off to bed to avoid having to answer any more questions, like, what was his name? And that's the end of that chapter. And I think we'll probably leave it there for today rather than starting a new chapter. So I hope you liked that and you're liking the continuing story of Who Will Love Ariadne. So, like I said, I'll leave it there for today. And I hope you enjoyed that little bit of the story. It's shorter than before, but I hope it helped you to relax. And if you're tired, that you manage to get some sleep. Right. And anymore, leave it at that. Leave it on that note. And I'll hopefully talk to you again really soon. The next part of the story. Bye. Bye.